All rise. In the presence of our flag, emblematic of the Constitution, and remembering the principles for which it stands, the United States District Court is now in session. The Honorable David O. Carter, Judge, presiding.
The Court of Appeal, 4th Appellate District, Division 3, is now in special session. The Honorable William F. Rylersdam, Acting Presiding Justice, presiding. We welcome the Chief Justice of California, the Honorable Tani Cantil Sakaue.
We're going to invite all of you to remain standing for the presentation of the colors by the Marines of the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Regiment. Present the colors. If you please be seated. Well, first, welcome to all of you, the legal community and friends here in Orange County. This is truly a historic honor and occasion. A colleague who is referred to oftentimes by all of us as Justice David Sills, sometimes by others of us as Captain David Sills, United States Marine Corps, but by all of us in this room as a true and dear friend. It's unprecedented that the California Court of Appeal and the United States Federal Court would join together in such a ceremony. It's literally a first. But what makes this so absolutely special today is the honor of having David's wife, Susan Sills, with us. She was escorted by Captain Tesloff of the United States Marine Corps to start our ceremony today. Susan, we're honored to have you. These accolades that are about to be really lavished upon David because they're so well deserved and so well earned today is really an outpouring of our affection for you, for your guidance, wisdom, gentleness, and love from a colleague and friend that we simply knew as David. We're especially honored to have the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, who's an absolutely gracious person, and Justice Bill Rylersdam, who's been a friend. I don't think we need to be reminded of the following. If Lincoln could change the history of the world with a few words at Gettysburg in less than 2.5 minutes, our speakers today will take less than 5 minutes. Because at 5 o'clock we will promptly gather at the corner and go across for a very special ceremony presented by the United States Marine Corps. Without further introduction, I want to introduce John Houston. I refer to him as Local Boy, President of the Orange County Bar Association. I don't think John needs any introduction other than he represents the thousands and thousands of people in our legal community, this wonderful legal community today. John?
Thank you, Judge Carter. Welcome everyone to this very special tribute and celebration of life honoring Presiding Justice David Sills. It's my honor to introduce each of the distinguished speakers today. Each one deserves a comprehensive introduction, the likes of which I cannot give today. I've been threatened with the collective contempt of over 50 courts, Judge Carter, if I go on at length, so I will dive right into it and try to keep within your time constraints. First, it is a great honor to have the Chief Justice visit us in Orange County again. Chief Justice Cantil Sakaue has served more than 20 years on California appellate and trial courts. She is the first Asian American to lead the state's judiciary. In addition to serving as Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, she oversees a statewide judiciary that includes more than 1,700 judges, several hundred other judicial officers, 21,000 court employees, and a budget of roughly $4 billion that she's desperately attempting to preserve. She's already shown her dedication to the courts in her relatively short tenure by her active work on the ground around the state. Many of you know that she just visited last week here in our 4th District Division III Court of Appeals. She's also equally dedicated to the individuals serving so hard in the name of our courts, and she's showing and demonstrating her commitment again by honoring us with her presence in this special celebration. Please join me in welcoming the Chief Justice.
There are exceptions to every rule. The Chief Justice is granted as much time as she would like.
Well, no, really, I come here in humility and out of tremendous respect for a remarkable man. I do not come alone. I come with the admiration, affection, and respect from the California Supreme Court, the California Judicial Council, and the Administrative Office of Courts. I come here because today we honor a remarkable man. We honor a man whose work and whose concern and courage will live on. And I have only a few words to say in that respect. I know that he will live on in his work. Justice Sills, in his lifetime, authored over 2,400 opinions, 400 published. The precedent he set in emerging law in surrogacy, land use, election law, and family law will forever guide us in our decision-making in California. He also worked, as many of you already know, 10 years in service to the city of Irvine, 4 times as mayor. And we've also heard reference to his work serving this country, protecting our freedoms as a captain in the Marine Corps. His work will live on. He will also live on through his efforts across the street. He took on a project that usually is outside the reach of most justices and judges and put together a building from the ground up with hands-on, with incredible attention to detail. And we have for that now the beautiful court building across the street. I was just there, and I know in every detail and in every honor that Justice Sills lives on. And he also lives on, as we know, in our hearts based on those here today because of his affection, his courage, because we are his friends, and because he will live on forever in memories in our hearts. But I also want to take a moment to really extend my support and respect for the courage and compassion of Susan in these last few months, but also for the lifetime you spent with Justice Sills, because all of us know that a hero in public life, a hero on the courts, and a hero in our U.S. Armed Services always has another hero. And we know that throughout it was you, Susan. So again, with great respect and honor, we, the California Supreme Court, the Judicial Council, and the Administrative Office of the Courts, salute you as well. Thank you.
It is now my honor to introduce Acting Presiding Justice William Rylersdam. Justice Rylersdam served as a Superior Court judge for approximately 10 years before he was appointed an Associate Justice of the California Court of Appeal in 1995. Justice Rylersdam has always attempted to give back to his legal community. Over the years, he has published over 60 articles, served as an advisor to the Executive Committee of the Litigation Section of the State Bar. He writes a monthly newsletter on new legal developments and is a co-author of 2 popular Rudder Group guides in his spare time. Please join me in welcoming Justice Rylersdam.
Thank you. Before I start, I want to thank the Orange County Bar Association, Joe Dunn, and particularly our colleague Richard Feibel for organizing this memorial. Particularly Richard, when I asked him to take charge of this, and when he agreed to do so, I don't think either one of us had the slightest idea how much work would be involved. And he has spent a great deal of time and effort to make all the arrangements, and I, on behalf of all my colleagues, thank you, Richard. few weeks ago, actually quite shortly after David passed away, one of our staff attorney, Bob Wolf, came up with an idea, which we implemented, and we got a book and asked with blank pages and passed it over the last couple of weeks through our court for you, Susan, and everybody who wanted to, and that included, I think, everybody there, wrote a page or a page and a half with some of their memories of David, and we will present that to you later. I just received the book back this morning, and on reading it, I was really struck by a theme that ran throughout the comments. The tone that David set in governing the court. There were many comments, but such as, when I first arrived, the atmosphere of the court had a dramatic impact. Compared to my prior working experience, I was in heaven, working in such a calm, peaceful, and congenial environment. Although I did not know it at the time, I came to learn that much of this was due to Justice Sills' management style. He allowed us to work without being pressured or micromanaged. Another comment written by another member or employee of our court. Justice Sills led by example, showing respect and cordiality to everyone. Here's another. The judge was the most remarkable but more admirable person I have ever known. I think that was because of a unique personal security. He brought out the best in everyone. He gave everybody he touched a chance to flourish. His certainly is a life of accomplishments, and that many of which has already been alluded to: his distinguished military service, 20 years of legal practice, his service to the city of Irvine as city councilman and as mayor during a period when the city was growing at a tremendous rate, served as chairman of the Irvine Health Foundation for 26 years. And in 1985, he and I, on the very same day, were appointed to the trial bench. I was appointed to the LA Superior Court, and he to the Orange County Superior Court. I didn't know David up to that point at all, and actually after a very short time I transferred to Orange County Superior Court and got to know Dave while we were both on the trial court. He was there for 5 years before he moved on to the Court of Appeal. But I really got to know David much better, of course, after I came to the Court of Appeal 16 years ago. We worked together for that entire period. David, of course, led our court for 20 years, far longer than any of his predecessors, and he was a born leader. As has been mentioned, David was the first justice in the California appellate process to deal with the very difficult legal issues of surrogacy when there was no legislation and there was no precedent, and he established precedents in this area that continue to serve our society well. Also, in my opinion, David was probably the best writer on our court. You all probably have read his opinions and know they're always clear and many times entertaining. But he set the tone for our whole court. And as our colleague Bill Bedsworth wrote, he was a kind and generous a man as I've ever known. Rooms got warmer and brighter when David Sills walked in. People got better. Problems seemed smaller. Leadership came naturally to him. Good and decent people have a calming and reassuring effect on others, and David was good and decent in spades. And David's longtime staff attorney, Jeff Calkins, wrote me, he said there was something profoundly old-fashioned about Justice Sills. Perhaps it was his Midwest origins, perhaps it was his call to military service. Somehow the old-school motto, God, duty, country, comes to mind. Whatever he did, he always was a Marine captain. Steadfast, calm, loyal, looking ahead. He picked his battles with care and worked with us with admirable patience. Patience and tolerance were his chief virtues. No wonder Churchill and Eisenhower were his patron saints. David kept all the parts of our cards moving together. He did so in his unique way, quietly, and always with sensitivity to the needs of others. He was always willing to listen to anybody's position. David and I did not always agree, but I never heard David raise his voice in disagreement. Finally, of course, I think I should mention David's pride in obtaining our new courthouse. a project that took many years before the first spade was turned. And without Davis, this project would never have come to completion. We will all miss him very much.
Thank you, Justice Reilersdam. Rick Daravan is a certified specialist in appellate law and a partner at Snell and Wilmer. He is a current member and past president of the California Academy of Appellate Lawyers and a fellow of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers. He practices regularly before Division III of the 4th District, and Presiding Justice Sills appointed Rick to be on the committee that planned the courthouse, and he's very proud of that. Rick, welcome.
Thank you, John. Let me say this right off the top. Presiding Justice Sills was a terrific judge, but more importantly, he was a terrific human being, as you've heard already, and I think that speaks volumes about him. I'd like to focus my remarks from the standpoint of a lawyer who did practice regularly before him and his court, and start out by saying that quite simply, it's the best appellate court I've ever appeared in front of, and I'm convinced it started at the top with his leadership. Quite apart from the quality of his opinions, which I'll get to in a minute, other things about the court made it a wonderful place to practice. The court staff was just unfailingly kind and gentle. I think they took after Presiding Justice Sills. They took a practical approach to solving things. Cases didn't get decided on technical matters, but things got decided on the merits. And so if you had a problem with the court, they'd figure out a way to get around it from the standpoint of processing cases. And I think the court, the clients who practiced before the court and had lawyers who were there knew that the court took a kind view and a fair view of their cases, and I think that really made the clients happy to be in front of that court. But the essence of Justice Sills from a lawyer's standpoint, I think, was the opinion writing that he did. You can't help but appreciate his writing regardless of whether you've won or lost. And when you pick up an opinion, you knew instantly it was a Dave Sills opinion. You didn't have to go to the back of the opinion and see who signed it. I mean, you knew. Shakespeare and deadpan humor made frequent appearances in his opinions. And I'd like to read a passage from one of them, if I will, because the writing is just so good. He says, in Shakespeare's Henry V, there is an early scene where the Archbishop of Canterbury delivers a long, tedious, and virtually incomprehensible speech to the new king. Parenthetical, he says, incomprehensible unless you have the text in front of you and you've taken a graduate seminar on the law of royal succession in medieval France. Now who else would write something like that? Then he goes on to describe this topic that is being talked about, and then he goes on to say, but upon that fine pedantic legal distinction would awake the sleeping sword of war, and as a consequence, later in the play, 10,000 French knights and soldiers would get slaughtered in the mud at Agincourt. In the case before us, by contrast, the worst thing that can happen as a result of the fine pedantic distinctions on which this case turns is that a case which should be otherwise considered by one court will be heard by another, which is not quite the same thing as dying in a battle from a gale of Welsh arrows. I mean, how many opinions will you pick up and find something like that? Just terrific writing. But it's not just the turn of a phrase that made him a great judge, I don't think. It's the moral quality that he brought to his opinions. And I want to talk about one case in particular for a couple of minutes. It's a case called Pisante versus Williams and had to do with a baseball card trading company. And in that case, it involved what he called a rookie baseball card trading company. And it was on the cusp of success or failure, depending on whether it could obtain financing. And its lawyer, in Justice Sills' indomitable words, stepped up to the plate and in the clutch delivered financing to the company. And the board of directors was so happy they promised the lawyer a certain number of shares in the company, which would later turn out to be worth millions and millions of dollars. And what happened, though, there was not all joy at this company. Ultimately, the company, in Presiding Justice Sills' words, quote, outright reneged on its promise, forcing the lawyer to sue for breach of contract. While ultimately Presiding Justice Sills held that the company had a right to do that, he did, in the course of the opinion, give the company a lecture and talked about what is right versus what is strictly legal. He said, the board had a clear moral obligation to honor its promise to the lawyer. He had, as the baseball cliche goes, stepped up to the plate and homered on the upper deck's behalf. And if this court could enforce such moral obligations, we would advise the company even yet to pay something in honor of its promise. And I think that speaks volumes about where Dave Sills was and how he ran his life, how he ran his court, and how he interacted with other people. Speaking of other people and lawyers, I'll leave you with this. He did not like lawyers who adopted what we call Rambo-style tactics in the courtroom, pressed for every advantage, tried to take unfair advantage of people, but he wanted lawyers to be colleagues. And he wrote in another opinion, "The proper model of professional relations between opposing counsel has been around since Shakespeare. And do as adversaries do in law, strive mightily, but eat and drink as friends." We've all lost a great friend in presiding Justice Sills, but let's strive mightily in our work and honor him by eating and drinking as friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Senator Joe Dunn is currently Executive Director of the California State Bar. He served with distinction in the California State Senate from 1998 until 2006. Among other roles, he has since served as CEO of the California Medical Association and as a founding member of the Senator's Law Firm. Most importantly, he is a longtime friend of Justice Sills, and he showed his trademark initiative in recent weeks in taking a lead role in organizing this celebration, something that we are deeply indebted to you for, Senator Dunn. Thank you.
Is this where I'm supposed to say, "May it please the court"? Judge Carter, can I beg for extra minute or two?
You have 6 minutes and 38 seconds, Joe. Take your time.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone that is here, and thanks to everyone who made this event happen. I appreciate the comments, John, but obviously it was a big team effort, and everybody at OCBA was absolutely incredible. And thanks to all the others, you know who you are, that made this happen. My apologies, as you can tell, for those I have not interacted with yet. Don't interact with me. I have a cold. This is the first day out after 4 days laid up on the couch watching football, so my apologies for my cold. This is one of those ones that the comments where many of you have heard me speak many times, unfortunately, and you know generally I speak without notes. It's something that I pride myself on in my giving my my presentations publicly. Perhaps the best honor I can give to David is to admit I can't do that with this one. And so I wrestled with what it was that I should say today and how I should say it. And I reached out to a very dear friend of mine, who many of you know, but I will not identify, who made a suggestion. He had written a book a year ago, which is an incredible book. It's simply a collection of letters he wrote to people in his life that had passed on before him, commenting, whether it was family, friends, it could have been his teenage heartthrob that he only met once. But these were folks who crossed his paths, and he wanted to put a collection of letters together, and he published that book about a year ago. And I thought his recommendation was a good one for me. So what I want to do today, is quickly read my letter to David. Well, here we are at the celebration of your life event. And being the lovable curmudgeon that you are, it's an event you didn't ask for, nor did you want. But we're doing it anyways, David. Perhaps the first time we're simply ignoring your requests, simply because we want to. But I've struggled for months about what to say today. On a personal level, our friendship was deep and well known. And over the course of the years, we laughed together. We cried together. We spent your final days together. And through that time, we talked history. We debated politics. We wondered whether the Big Ten, we're both Big Ten graduates, would ever produce a champion football team again. We strategized for years over the creation of the new UCI Law School. We rolled our eyes constantly at the lunatics in your political party and the ones in mine. We learned things about each other we can never tell. and we readily agreed that World War I was the seminal event of the 20th century, yet could never agree on whether FDR or Ronald Reagan was the best president of that same century. Through it all, you became one of the most important people in my life, and I proudly stand by the fact that you were indeed a second father to me. But I think in your heart, David, you know that. What I do need to say today is something bigger than our deep friendship. It is something that I think you know, but would never admit to anyone, including yourself. It is something that was captured in that article I told you about. That article that came up time and time and time again between us. And let me pause for a moment and just share with you the article that I'm referring to, because I used it in many of my speeches over the years, and it was an article that David loved. And it was an article I read in, of all places, an airplane magazine. On the airplane, you all know the magazines, of course. And it was an article about a young man who had gone across the country to college in the 1960s, and as a freshman, about a month into school, he started to call his parents every single night. For those who went to college in the 1960s, when there was no cell phones and et cetera, it was that payphone at the end of the hall in the dorm. And he started to call his family across the country every single day. Until finally once, after about 2 weeks of the constant calls, his father finally said, "Son, we appreciate hearing from you, but how are you paying for these calls?" And the son said very excitedly that in fact the payphone at the end of the hall was broken, and all the students can make as many calls for free as they want. And the son was very excited, and the father simply said, "Son, that's not right." The son blew him off, of course, and thought just curmudgeon dad. But over the night, that comment, but a few words, from his father ate away at him until finally the next morning he felt he had no choice but to do the right thing, call the phone company, who promptly came out and fixed the phone, much to the chagrin of all of his classmates. What that story was about was simply about those few individuals in our lives who, with but a few words, can change the path we are on, short-term or long-term, through their strength, through their wisdom, through their ethical assuredness, and through their quiet determination. For many of us, that person is our dad. David, that article was about you. Yes, for me personally, but more importantly, for our entire community in Orange County for the last 20 years. Whenever there was a problem, a challenge, a crisis facing our community, inevitably, we would say, "What does David think?" It is as though we are one large Orange County family, but when we were worried, one of us kids would say, "Let's ask Dad." David, you have been the dad to our entire community. It is a role you neither sought nor relished. And it came to you simply because of the person you are. And like a good Marine, like a great dad, you accepted the role without fanfare or attention, knowing it was one of responsibility, not privilege. You just did what was right. It's what dads do. As a result, you made all of us better lawyers, better citizens, better persons, like no one else could. And indeed, it was your greatest achievement. I know by now you're saying, as you often did to me, "Wrap it up, Dunn." My apologies, Your Honors. Your Irish bullshit is getting the best of you. But I wanted you to know that all of us stand in awe of the true presence you provided to our entire community. It's a presence that will last forever. Now back to that Reagan-FDR debate. Signed, your colleague, your student, your friend, your adopted son, Joe. P.S. It was FDR. And one last comment for all of us. It is said in time we get over losses of loved ones, but I always say we never get over them, we simply get used to them. With David, that will be a very, very long time.
Thank you, Senator Dunn. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Brigadier General Frank Quinlan of the U.S. Marine Corps. General Quinlan practices with Newmeyer and Dillion. General Quinlan is a longtime Marine Corps colleague and friend of Justice Sills. A former FBI agent, Brigadier General Quinlan is the current chairman of several corporation board audit committees. Most importantly, he knew Justice Sills well, and even more so, fundamentally understood how important the Marine Corps was to presiding Justice Sills. Welcome, General.
Thank you, John. Well, it's an honor to be here to recognize Dave's extraordinary career. Dave was a member of the November 10th Association, a group of Marines. A number of us in this room are part of that group. We meet annually and have for 26 years to celebrate the tradition of our Corps, the annual birthday. Dave was a trustee of ours, a longstanding trustee, and a trustee of our Corps' tradition. When Dave retired, the Commandant of the Marine Corps sent a letter to us. We'd hoped to read it and congratulate Dave at the most recent birthday of the Marine Corps. But in talking with Justice Bill Bedworth, we decided we'd better present it to him right away. So Bill and I drove to Dave's house, and there we found him among a group of loyal old-time friends and Marines in his library, his extensive library, as Senator Dunn knows. We told Dave we would like to read the Commandant's letter aloud. And Dave looked at us for a moment, and then he pulled himself out of his chair and he stood at attention. And so everyone else in the room stood at attention. And we read the letter. And if I may, I'll read it to you. 12 July 2011. Dear Justice Sills, on the occasion of your retirement from the California Court of Appeal, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation on behalf of the United States Marine Corps for your lifetime of devoted service to Corps and country. You answered our nation's call and proved your mettle as a platoon and then a company commander in our Corps. When you left our active ranks, you continued to use your exceptional leadership skills and legal talents to benefit your community and your country. While practicing law and serving as a city councilman, a mayor, and a judge, you consistently demonstrated the utmost integrity, professionalism, and commitment. Your most recent assignment as a presiding justice of the California Court of Appeal is the culmination of many years of outstanding service and accomplishment. The myriad honors and awards you've received throughout your career are testament to your outstanding professional leadership and unwavering fidelity. As you now prepare to leave the judicial ranks, know that you have earned the admiration and respect of all who have known and served with you, as well as the appreciation of a grateful nation. Thank you for your dedicated service and a job very well done. On behalf of all Marines, my wife Bonnie and I wish you and Susan all the best as you begin the next chapter in your lives. Semper Fidelis, James F. Amos, General, United States Marine Corps, Commandant of the Marine Corps. As we finished the letter, Dave stayed firmly at attention. It's as though he was reporting for one last duty. Dave knew that the Commandant reaching out is an extraordinary event, and it signified our motto, always faithful to fellow Marines as Dave was. Judge Carter will close by directing us to a flag presentation and rifle salute ceremony over in front of the Court of Appeal. That was personally ordered by the Commandant of the Marine Corps in honor of Dave and to acknowledge Susan's loyalty and fidelity to her husband and to our Corps. Thank you.
Thank you, General Quinlan. Judge Andrew Guilford has served as a United States District Court judge since 2006. Everyone in here knows that he has been a pillar of the Orange County Bar for decades, as a longtime resident partner at the Shepard & Mullen Law Firm, as a former Orange County Bar president when he called for the founding of a public law school in Orange County, as well as for a federal courthouse to be built in Orange County, and as our former California State Bar president. And during his extensive period of public service and private sector work, he naturally came to know, befriend, and greatly admire Justice Sills. Judge Guilford.
Well, I'm really humbled as I look out over this audience with so many great giants of our legal community who have contributed so much. I thank those who have put this together. I particularly thank them for honoring me with the request that I speak. Indeed, it is with humility that I do so. You know, lots of paper crosses my desk, and much of it reflects the shortcomings and disputes and squabbles among people. But occasionally, over the last 20 years or so, I've been blessed to get a document like this. It is classy, it is usually brief, it is sometimes handwritten, it often raises fascinating points to think about, and it has always made my day. It's been a personal letter from Presiding Justice David G. Sills. Now, I have a stack of these letters, and I'm sure many of you have likewise been so blessed. I treasure them. We've had reference to letters today from Joe. We didn't coordinate our comments here. Historically, such letters have been common from great people, but now the art seems to have been lost, except for truly great people, truly great and gracious people. In many ways, these letters are the measure of this truly great and gracious man we honor here today. Here's one very old, discussing plans to get a law school at UCI. Here's one about getting more justices for our Court of Appeal in Orange County. Here's one with some insights about the war in Iraq. Here's one sending an article on, yes, our mutual hero, Sir Winston Churchill, graciously sent to me. It's like I had a clipping service in the presiding justice of this county. Here's one graciously recommending a young man for a job. And here's one saying we need to get together to discuss our lists of the greatest U.S. presidents. Joe, I don't think it was Ronald Reagan. But you know, Dave used to dine with Ronald Reagan. And I do wonder, and maybe you wonder, except Joe may have stolen my thunder, whether Ronald Reagan would be first on that list. Knowing Dave got me within 1 degree of separation of that president. But more importantly, knowing Dave put me in personal contact with a truly great man. You know, his letters were straightforward and to the point, like a Marine who gets the job done and takes the hill. These letters were eloquent and well written from a very skilled writer of California's common law. These letters all reflect a brilliant mind from a devoted student of history and the law. These letters reflect a kind and selfless heart, always generous and anxious to help others. These letters were humble and gracious, sometimes providing undeserved thank yous and support. Here's a fairly recent one where he said, "As you know, I always feel uncomfortable when people start to sing my praises." Keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind what our chief judge down here told us in terms of time limits, and keeping in mind the hour that we now have, and keeping in mind Justice Sills' appreciation of the skill of brief communication, I'll bring my comments to a close. But I'll go back to that letter about getting together to discuss our rankings of the greatest presidents. I'm sorry I never got a chance to have that discussion. I will forever regret that. Sadly, I'll never know the true insights of Dave that would have been provided in that discussion. But Dave will always be on my list as a great man who served his country and his state and his city and his beloved Orange County, all with the loving support of his wife, Susan. I hope you'll keep in touch with us and all those who loved you and love Dave. I want to close with the words of a president and a general ranking pretty high on my list. I'll close by paraphrasing what President Eisenhower said at the funeral of Winston Churchill. Again, we didn't coordinate. There was reference from the quote read by Justice Rylersdam about his two heroes, Eisenhower and Churchill. And the words of Eisenhower at that funeral, I think, are largely applicable to our friend David Sills. So I paraphrase. At this moment, as our hearts stand at attention, we say our affectionate, though sad goodbye to the leader to whom we all owe so much. In the coming years, folks will strive to interpret the motives, describe the accomplishments, and extol the virtues of David Sills, judge, soldier, statesman, and citizen that this great county was proud to claim as its own. Among all the things so written or spoken, there will ring out one uncontestable refrain. Here was a champion of justice. May God grant that we and the generations who will remember him heed the lessons he taught us in his deeds, in his words, in his life. May we carry on his work until no one is denied justice and no person is denied opportunity for fulfillment. And now to you, Justice Sills, my old friend, farewell. Farewell, yes, for now, but my faith tells me that I will again be in the presence of this powerful force who will again be teaching me what it means to be great, not through his vast knowledge of history, but through being himself.
Well, in a few moments, we're going to retire the colors. And in a few moments, I'm going to ask, after the retiring of the colors, if you'd be so gracious to adjourn us at the conclusion, Chief. But before doing so, I want to give you some directions because I don't think we'll have your attention. We're going to gather in a true military operation that Dave would be so proud of at 5 o'clock. The big hands on the 12 and the small hands 5, across the street at the Court of Appeal. And the Santa Ana Police Department is waiting to block the intersection during rush hour. So they're asking us to exit the courthouse as quickly as possible, gather at the corner, and they're going to escort us and close, if you can imagine, the intersection for a few brief seconds. If you're lucky enough to make that group, or you're blessed, the rest of you are on your own in terms of traffic. This ceremony will take place at 5 o'clock. There'll be a traditional rifle salute. A flag will be presented to Susan. When we retire these colors, we're retiring the colors for this ceremony. But our affection, Susan, for you and Dave will never be retired. God bless Captain Sills, Justice Sills, our friend David. Retire the colors. Captain, if you step forward, please. Escort Mrs. Sills. And Chief, would you adjourn our courts?
Yes, thank you for the honor. In honor and memory of Justice David Sills, we stand adjourned.
I just have to check her out.
Yeah, they're coming now.
Magazine of blood ammunition! No! Ready! Hey! Fire! Ready! Hey! Fire! Ready! Hey! Fire!
Please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation of your husband's selfless service to country